Well, and I think too, it's so interesting. We started this call off by you saying how awesome is being a dad, right? How special is it? And it's so funny how the common things that almost every person in America deals with are stuff that we never really get any type of formal conversation, training, or any type of dedicated resource unless we have to awkwardly stand up and raise our hand and be like, so being a husband's unique, being a father's unique. Like those aren't things that we honestly commonly talk about. Now, granted, everyone on the spectrum is going to have a different opinion on how you go be a husband, how you go be a father. But I'm like, it's become abundantly clear to me that I'm happy you're doing this is the scenic route we're taking. But I'm happy you're doing this because it gives catalyst for people to have the thoughts for themselves. Not to say that I have some kind of beautiful wisdom that the listener will pick up on, but you think about any other topic like business, you have so much resource and conversation and dialogue, and it gets down to these specific niches of business. And, I benefit so much from those, but I'm like, man, you have to go actively really seek out some of these resources to have honest, open conversations as a dad, because there's a little bit too of like, at the end of the day, something that's so special is also a point of pride. Like that's my identity. So can I quickly go to someone else and concede like, hey, I could be doing a lot better, but there's so much of my identity here. And it's really interesting. And I've talked to my wife about this a lot, is how little we frame up from our mission and like a little bit of like the mission statement around your life. Like I can tell you a sense mission statement where we're going to be next year at this point in time, what our growth rates are. And I told my wife, I was like, hey, I think I owe it to our family to start crafting what a mission statement should be. We've loosely talked about kind of what those things would look like, but what's my MO as just a human? And like, how do I most intentionally seek joy for my family and my kids? And what does that route kind of look like? Because I think busyness is such a culprit of kind of like this river that takes you, and you can kind of move side to side if you want, but at the end of the day, like you're in the current, right? And I think busyness can so quickly take you from kind of those core principles, and we sometimes we take that for granted, right, with our loved ones, and like how quickly we can kind of discern like these, hey, this is a moment, like we should take a moment in this, not just kind of like click next.
Yeah, the real sort of pain of that is that it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to actually be able to tell in the moment that it's a moment, quote unquote, right? It's like it only really works in hindsight, and maybe the delta in time of when you experience it to when you realize it shrinks. But
you can collapse that, then you're magic.
If you can collapse that, like you are, I don't know what that would make you. Would that make you like a Zen master? Like like, so just living in the present moment so well, like I don't even know if that's possible. I think it's one of those things where you kind of see, so I was talking to Nick Fowler, who's also in the CrossFit space. He does the strength conditioning for brute strength, and he had something to say about this, where he kind of was talking about it from a perspective of, at a certain point, you've experienced so many things, you've seen all the time that you've had, and looking forward, you realize that the time that you have upcoming is really precious because you've seen and experienced so much. Like at the heart of it is this almost like longing for the ability to re-experience those things, not to change it, but just to like absorb it more.
And I think the double click there's a deep vulnerability in saying, I actually didn't do that right. I actually wasn't as great of a father as I could have been. But you have to create this realistic version of what your expectation is, because you have to hit so many buckets as a father, right? You have to hit like, hey, here's a nice house, right? And I'm speaking in general terms, right? Everyone's got different roles these days, so I don't want to, ruffle any feathers, but there's all these buckets you have to there's so many buckets you have to hit as a father. And so at some point, by making a decision to actively spend time, there's something you're dropping the ball at over here. And I think there's always the hindsight benefit, but I think it's finding the way, like the hack or the Zen there is like, how do you find moments to celebrate joy when it's happening, right? Because again, like I feel myself in something that I try to actively talk about. And again, like my wife could be the fact checker on this episode and be like, I would love to marry that guy, because he sounds like he's got it dialed. Like the of course expectation is like, this is the version of who we want to be, but you have to create a version that's actually realistic based on your life. If you're comparing it to some index of a version of a father that you think you can be, you're going to fail. And I think it gives you the ability to feel a little bit better about making changes instead of this insurmountable version of yourself that you're like, hey, I didn't like the father I was when she was 5, and I really messed up. And I can let myself feel guilty about those, but then let myself off the hook because I'm like, well, it was really hard for me to be that person. But I think it's, to your point, collapsing that, but also giving a realistic version and also like prioritizing the right things, right? You can chase so many moments of like, hey, this is me showing love for my kids. The reality is your kids are the best barometer to say like what they enjoy the most. If I ask them like, hey, what do you love about daddy? They're not going to say anything about the stuff that I might overvalue. Like, well, you don't think the yard's super cool? Like dad spends a lot of time in the yard doing this. Like you don't think that tree that daddy planted is a statement piece? Like, you know what I mean? So I think like don't lose these moments with your kid being busy curating the perfect father figure. You know what I mean? Like you have to kind of marinate in some of these moments, and they're not glamorous.
Yeah.
Like my son Everett will literally sit down and just want to play cars. Like he'll want to roll a car back and forth until I say, yeah, hey bud, super fun. Like I love doing this. I love sharing this with you, but let's transition to something else. So it's it's those little moments that I think you have to recognize while it's happening to the best of your ability, because it's so hard, man. And our brains are always processing through, the operation of the home, hey, what does my wife need? What do I need? What do these kids need? Have they eaten yet? Hey, you guys haven't bathed yet. Sorry to shut down the fun. Like there's all these things that are constantly kind of happening. And so we try our best, which is always an improvement, but to find those moments when they're actually happening, I'm like, oh, like this thing that we've been working really hard for that was supposed to be like at this park with these people on this day with perfect weather, that same level of joy is happening right now, just sitting in our room.
Yeah.
And like, I have a hard time finding the piece to be like, oh, this is it. Like, I don't have to work anymore. I can actually just enjoy it. Because sometimes I so often find myself working to create those moments, or like, hey, how do I kind of move everybody around to get them in this spot? And so it's tough, man. It's totally tough.